Hi, my name is Frances Lara, and I am presenting today the social policy of the death penalty. So, in a quick overview, we're going to be talking about what is the death penalty, and then we're going to jump into the death penalty here in the state of California. So, much more on a specific level. Then we're going to jump into relevant statistics regarding the death penalty. And then the cost of the death penalty, so a lot of numbers that involve how much the cost is for the state and individual case level, racial disparity in the death penalty, what was a huge factor when it came to my social policy analysis and conclusion, the pros and cons weighing on one another and seeing the good and the bad of the death penalty in the final revision and decision of the social policy of the death penalty in my perspective. So to begin with, the death penalty. Death penalty is the state's capital punishment to those who have been found guilty of heinous crimes through the observance of due process of law. Methods can be seen as hanging, lethal injection, stoning, beheading, electrocution, and shooting. Death penalty has been used by human societies for centuries to punish criminals. So I just wanted to deep dive into all the different methods to just kind of show the origins. It's always been in different forms, but ultimately, the ultimate goal of the death penalty has been to take someone's life who has been an individual who has participated in a very horrible or gut-wrenching crime that is seen as unforgivable. At the state level, the capital punishment is legal is still a legal penalty in the U.S. state of California. The state just carried out 709 executions from 1778 to 1972. Its execution was seen in 2006, and no executions have been carried out since, even though the executions have been put to a halt. Both years, 2012 and 2016, California voters rejected ballot measures aimed to abolish the death penalty. So we can see that the state of California is kind of at a halt where it doesn't know exactly where to go in direction of. It is seen as a state that has been more on the side of wanting to not participate in death row or the death penalty anymore, but it has not successfully been able to completely get rid of death row. Governor Gavin Newsom has done some pretty extreme things, such as suspending death penalty in California in 2019 and withdrawing lethal injection protocols and immediately closing execution chambers at the San Quentin State Prison. So, keep into just a little more specifics here in the state of California. There was a case called People versus Anderson that struck down the state capital punishment, and the voters in California reinstated the death penalty. And with that, it came with Proposition 17 legalizing the death penalty and ending the Anderson ruling. And even though that there has just been 13 executions since then, hundreds of inmates are still on death row. So that is the battlefield right now in California. So we are actually one of these states with the largest amount of people on death row, and we're kind of on a halt and not knowing on what to do next. If to retrial all these people or just lower them to life and parole. I mean, life in imprisonment without parole, and it's just kind of just there, but it needs to be revised as a social policy in the state of California. Some of the statistics of the death penalty, which are very alarming, is that the average cost is $2.4 million per case. 1,126 executions have been happening since 1976 in the States. Most executions rise in the year of 1999 for a weird, odd reason. 35 states still have the death penalty. And like I mentioned, California's death row is the largest in the country with more than 700 condemned prisoners. So it's been a great proposition when it comes to campaigns here in California, whether to repeal, abolish the death penalty, and just trying to figure out what we're going to do with that huge amount of individuals on death row. So some of the one of the most alarming things is the cost of the death penalty. Death penalty is much more expensive than life imprisonment. In California alone, the death penalty cost the current system $137 million. And it found that taxpayers have spent more than $4 billion on capital punishment here in California since it was reinstated in 1978, or $308 million for each of the 13 executions that have been carried out since. So each death row prisoner costs the state $184 million more than those sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. So a lot of people have been questioning, why are we spending so much money, which is not just a few more bills, it's millions more dollars on individuals who are on the state's death row. They haven't even gotten to the execution portion. So meanwhile, they're waiting for these for this amount of time. We're wasting millions and millions of dollars just to keep them on death row. And this has to do with the jury selection in the cases. It's 43 weeks longer. It costs us $200,000 more than in life without parole cases. So it's jury selection, hiding security that practices that are needed for each inmate, and just legal costs that are costing our system millions and billions of dollars that can be placed, instead on rehabilitation programs, or maybe life imprisonment without parole, and all these other alternatives that we could be using these funds on. So a huge factor in the social policy of the death penalty is its broken origins. So it has high levels of racial disparity. Most people on death row are mentally ill and impoverished, so they don't have a lot of resources, they don't have a lot of money to pay good lawyers. So that really results in them being placed on death row much more often. Women, for example, are only 3% of the executions, but their death sentence is 11 times higher. And then the whole dynamic when it comes to black individual killing a white person is much more likely to receive death penalty than a white individual killing a black. And it shows that it connects back into just the entire system. For example, 98% of chief district attorneys, which are the ones that ultimately decide if you're going to get the punishment of death penalty, are white, and only 1% are, black or minority. And it just shows, for example, here in my PowerPoint, you can see this graph, and it just shows that just 28% were cases that actually, got the federal death penalty, which when it comes to minorities, let's see, 45% were black, 7% other, and 20% Hispanic. And that just makes way much more majority of the white folks that receive death penalty, which shows how completely unfair, the battleground is for folks getting death penalty. Some of the opponents are the Roman Catholic Church, civil rights movements, civil rights leaders such as Martin Luther King, for example, Governor Gavin Newsom, a lot of political figures that have been against the death penalty social policy. And of course, it divides into younger adults as well, millennials, Democrats, parents. Usually the people who are supporting is parents of murdered children in the US, obviously the parents of the victims, Republicans, older adults, or people without much education, such as high school or less. So some of the pros and cons. The pros of the death penalty is that it does go with the illusion that it dissuades others from doing serious crimes, but it's actually seen that crime rates have not gone down in states that have the death penalty actively operating in the states. Make sure criminals do not strike again. Believe that someone who has taken your life doesn't deserve to live, and it provides closure to the victim's family. And obviously, the negatives have been that the money factor. So it's costing the nation and the states that have this social policy lots of money, and it has been proven before that innocents have been wrongly executed, which is huge and something that seems completely unfair and unjust. So my final conclusion is that the death penalty does need a lot of revising. I do believe that from a social work perspective, after analyzing the social policy more in depth, that we should be focusing more on rehabilitation programs or assessing carefully if an inmate should be granted another chance or an alternative, such as life without parole, which is actually costs us way less money. For example, the death penalty seems very flawed when it comes to origins of racism and profiling. The racial factor, and it seems that the whole policy is a very flawed one, and it doesn't provide an equal playing ground for all individuals who come across it. The death penalty needs a lot of revision and has not been made up to this point. It's kind of been ignored, and individuals are still getting executed, even when the origins seem to be very flawed, considering it was from a racial perspective that has been biased for many years. It also shows it's very ineffective. So studies show that murder rates, like I said, are constantly actually higher than in non-death penalty states. So it doesn't really make a difference in, crime rates or murder rates. And when it comes to speaking about it globally, we can see that the United States is kind of behind because Europe has already adopted a death penalty-free mindset, mentality, and legal system. Latin America is also death penalty free, and much of Africa has stopped using the death penalty. So it seems that the United States is kind of in that halt where we're trying to figure out the effectiveness, and we have seen through the statistics and throughout the years that the death penalty hasn't really made a difference in lowering crime rates. Also with that, adding to the racial disparities, it just seems that the social policy needs a lot of work, or if not, even better, to be abolished completely and being focused more on rehabilitation programs, like I mentioned, and just reintegrating these individuals that have been part of the prison system, the correction system, back into society, being able to give them another chance, and hopefully, or just keeping them in prison for life without costing us millions and millions of dollars. Thank you. That is the end of my presentation, and this is the reference page where I included several links of where I got my information from and where I gathered facts just to come and conclude with this presentation. Thank you so much.